Joining us now from Tel Aviv, Israel, is former Middle East editor for the Associated Press, Dan Perry. This visit from President Marcos from the Philippines, according to the Associated Press, China, the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Taiwan, they've all been involved in long, unresolved territorial conflicts in the South China Sea. It's a busy shipping passage. The Chinese Coast Guard has repeatedly used water cannons to hit Filipino boats in the South China Sea. How much of a focus of today's discussion between the president and President Marcos will be on that issue?
Well, it's fascinating. I mean, the president appears to have connected between political issues and his tariff policy in ways that are a little bit bizarre. I mean, note that he's threatening tariffs against Brazil because they're Trumpy former presidents on trial, which two things should never go together. But yet they do in this case. So one might think that that could factor into talks with China. The Philippines is an interesting case as far as trade goes. I mean, the U.S. runs a trade deficit with the Philippines as well, but it's not very great. I mean, we're talking, I think, about something like $8 billion. So I think this is a little bit of a test case to see how far Trump is willing to go to endanger international trade because of his idea that it's somehow a zero-sum game. The bigger fish that he must fry, obviously, are not only China, but also Japan, where the current leadership is much weakened by the recent loss of the upper chamber of the Japanese parliament. So you have a bit of a lame duck or a weakened government in Japan that has a lot of trade with the U.S. when it comes to electronics and cars and so forth. And that's where a lot of the focus, I think, is going to lie. The Philippines is a bit of a test case to see how far Trump is going to push the tariffs. And I think in that regard, the rest of the world is watching, not just Asia with its issues in the South China Sea, but also the European Union that has basically threatened to take counter-tariff measures that would effectively cut off international trade. And that is a big, big, big deal in many tens of billions.
And how you align allies as China becomes a greater and greater threat. Dan, when it comes to the tariff discussion and trade talk, the president has been able to make some deals, but we're approaching that August 1st deadline, and there are a lot of countries that have yet to reach an agreement with President Trump. How necessary do you believe it is for global trade and alliances for a deal to come out of this discussion today with President Marcos?
You know, it's a double-edged sword because, as I say, there are bigger deals in the offing. And if Marcos caves to Trump's demands, that will create a precedent, obviously, that will whet the White House's appetite for more deals where the other side caves. And so it'll be good for trade with the Philippines, no doubt, if they can just somehow agree on something and push aside the issue and resume some normalcy when it comes to trade. But you know, the Philippines is not the world's biggest country. We have, you know, as I say, it's total trade of I think around 20 billion with the Philippines. We're talking about magnitudes more with the European Union and with China and with other countries, and there's a very major issue here. Trump seems to view trade as like a contest where if you sell if you sell me more stuff than I sell you, then you have won. And it isn't really that way. I mean, I run a trade deficit with Amazon, and I'm happy about it because they have stuff I want to buy. And Trump seems to not understand this. And another thing that Trump seems to either not understand or you know, be lying about to the American people is that tariffs are paid by the Americans and not by the country being punished. Let's suppose that the U.S. slaps 30% tariffs on stuff coming to the U.S. from the Philippines. The way people who listen to Trump speak might think that works is that the Philippines has now paid a bunch of money, and this is revenue coming from the Philippines, but that is patently false. What's actually happening in such a situation is that the stuff in the Philippines is taxed. That's what tariffs are. And that tax raises the prices of the things from the Philippines, which are then paid either by the U.S. company that imports it or the U.S. consumer. So I don't know. This is a very painful issue. The world is watching this. I have to tell you, Marnie, with some stupefaction, it looks like the U.S. doesn't understand what tariffs are.
Well, I mean, the argument, though, Dan, from the administration and Trump has been, let's listen in here briefly as they speak.
President Marcos, think we'll get a deal done tonight, sir? I think we will.
The question was, will we get a deal done today? And President Trump said, I think we will. Dan, the point I was making there was the administration has stood firm by the idea that America has been taken advantage of, right? So when it comes to the tariff and the trade deals, the president is looking for more fair trade, and for a country like the Philippines to pay its part, to do its part, and that it hasn't been something that's been fair in the past. The Philippines doesn't have a lot of leverage. I mean, they depend on the U.S. for a lot of goods, too. So they have a lot to lose if they don't agree.
That's actually
Correct.
true. The U.S. has enormous leverage, and it is true that some countries have higher tariffs on U.S. goods than the U.S. has on goods from those countries. Again, it's the citizens of the given country that actually pay it, and not. So if they have high tariffs, it's on the Filipino people to pay it, not Americans don't pay it. But there is one circumstance in the world where tariffs are defensible on economic argument lines, and that is when you want to protect the local industry. So small countries that feel certain local industries are strategic, and they want to protect them from cheap imports from other countries that have tremendous economies of scale, and that is what the U.S. has. Yeah, they use tariffs to protect a strategic industry. Now, the U.S. has the biggest economy in the world, not the biggest population, but the biggest economy, and therefore it has tremendous scale, especially given that many of its industries are global, including if you look at the top 10 companies in the world by market cap. I think 9 are American. So these are global companies that are based in America. All of them have their little tricks about where they pay taxes, and it's a global economy now. And a country like the Philippines, understandably, wants to protect certain local industries by putting, tariffs, which I think are about 20% in the case of the Philippines. If we get them to lower that at the expense of their strategy to protect local industries, that would be seen as a win, perhaps, but is it really for humanity?
That's a bigger discussion, Dan, that we don't have time for this morning. But hey, you stuck around for a while. Thank you so much. We covered a lot of ground there. The president now meeting with President Marcos of the Philippines. We'll take you inside the Oval Office straight ahead. Dan Perry, as always, good to see you. Thank you, sir.